Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Lenora Fortin, and this is part of our workshop series on how to plan, budget, and manage legal matters for growing businesses. Today, we're going to talk about strategic legal management for your growing business. And that means we're going to explore how to build an effective legal foundation that protects your business while maximizing limited resources. The reality is, as you're growing, it constrains your resources because of, especially if you're growing quickly. So the legal landscape can be overwhelming in a situation like this when you're scaling rapidly, but with strategic planning, you can create a sustainable approach that grows with your business. In other words, you don't want to have to burn everything down right after you started creating it simply because you've outgrown it so fast. So, what are we going to cover today? Well, I'll be answering a series of questions submitted by clients and people who are not clients who simply show up for our workshops or sign up for our e-courses. We're going to cover things like smart legal budgeting, cost-effective legal solutions, risk assessment frameworks, contract and document management, compliance strategy, how to deal with evolving legal needs, employment law considerations, which is always a biggie, strategic IP protection, and how to measure the ROI from your legal spending. So, as you know, this is all informational. If you'd like to have a deeper conversation about any of these topics, then check out the details provided on how you can get in touch with us, whether you're just thinking of hiring us, have hired us in the past, or if you're currently a client. All right, Anna, I'm so glad that you're here with me to help steer this workshop per usual. What questions do we have today?
Of course, happy to be here. The very first question we have is the following. As a growing business with limited resources, what percentage of our annual budget should we typically allocate to legal matters? And how should we prioritize different legal needs? For example, IP protection, contracts, compliance, etc.
So, answering this question, when we're talking about dealing with a growing business that has limited need, limited resources, and when we say that, we're talking about in comparison with the needs and what they could be spending to meet those needs. This question is focused on what percentage of the annual budget should be used towards legal expenses, and how do you allocate that percentage between different types of matters, IP protection versus contracts versus compliance. You can do benchmarking by percentages. That is one approach, but you've got to really think about how that matches with where you are. Are you talking about a percentage of your operating budget, what you plan to spend to run the business? Are you talking about a percentage of your revenues? Net, profits? Where exactly are you really looking to peg that percentage? And then what kind of coverage are you looking for? I tell people your percentage, if you want to think about it from a percentage standpoint and benchmarking it that way, is going to shift depending upon your geographic location, your size, your industry, especially if you're a highly regulated industry, right? And so all of those have an impact. And then you have to think about what you plan to do with that budget. Is it purely a maintenance budget, meaning you've had a lawyer in the past, you already have some efficiencies, you already invested in creating efficiencies in the future, for example, by using templates, by creating customized templates, or by investing in software, things like that. And then you've got to think about, do you have cleanup? Is it, that's the difference between a maintenance, or maybe if you have to add some special projects to deal with audits or cleaning up or getting things done that were never done, like registrations, things like that. So if you think about that, you could have a budget that is like exceeds, it's over 100% of your actual revenues if you were pre-revenue, right? So I say percentage benchmarking is okay. It's one way of getting a gut check. I find that sometimes professionals will rely upon it too much because it doesn't really fit with where you are and with what you're trying to do. I think a better way of looking at it is to think about what is the return on that investment. And you want to measure that based off of not what the legal department says is important, but what you're trying to do in your business. What are you trying to accomplish? What do you plan to get done by the end of this quarter? What about the end of the next quarter? Okay. What about 9 months out? Where do you plan to be and what will you have done to get there? 1 year from now, what will you have done to get to where you plan to be by then? And you want to look at those actions, those planned activities to decide what will be the legal needs that support those activities. When you think about the status, like the new version of your business that you will be in 1 year, what legal needs are implicated? And then are any of those ones that have to get done now, or do you really need to assess once you're there before you start getting work, before you start working on it? So that's how I would suggest approaching it. But I've seen people have budgets that are like less than 1%, which is usually not sufficient for what they want to cover, to less than 1% of their revenues, to more than 100% of their revenues if they are pre-revenue, or if they have very few revenues. It could comprise a huge amount of their operating budget. It could be that your operating budget is it's a lower percentage, like a 2 to 4% of your operating budget, but it is being spent up front and then compared to the year. So maybe that's getting spent in the first quarter and not for the remainder of the year, right? So these are different ways to think about it. It's money over time, not like everything is happening at once. How do you prioritize? That was the other part of this question. When you've got this percentage or this amount from either your revenues or what you plan to spend to run your business, your operating budget, then how do you allocate it? Well, you have to make sure that your goals and your activities are the North Star. Like lawyers want to think that they're the smartest and that their brainy idea is the most magical thing in the room, and that takes center stage. And look at this awesome thing that I came up with, this idea that my brain created and how it's going to protect you. But what that does is it centers the lawyer's intellect. It's not putting you at the forefront of your business. It's not putting your business and the future version of it as the North Star for that legal work. And if you had a general counsel working in your business and a legal department in your business or for your business, the department itself is not the star. It's the business. That's the star. And the work really has to dovetail with that. And so that really should be where that focal point is in terms of prioritizing things. Now, your activities will be one part of it. Your revenues will be another part of it, right? That helps to prioritize things, but also your management style and your risk tolerance. So we have a way of developing this for people, for helping them establish a budget that makes sense, that is dovetailed to their specific goals and the activities that they plan to take. And it takes those 4 areas. What are you doing? What are your resources, which includes financial, but it's more than that. What is your management style? How much do you want to be involved in the work? How hands off do you want to be? And your tolerance for risk. And that can help determine what is a proper budget, what's the ideal timeline, and what would be there's how you want to manage it, right? How you want to manage it and how you want to prioritize what you'll be working on.